Here is the summary for week 3. So in these quick summary videos, I'll go over some of the important content, but I'll breeze through a lot of the stuff that is on the slides or stuff you can work through. But I will go through all the exercises in detail. So if you miss class, you can get those. If you have any questions, as always, just email me and I can clarify stuff. So this week was about morphological patterns and morphological models, and this is something we'll continue next week as well. So we'll look at different word formation processes, different models for word formation, and talk a little bit about which models should be used and when, and if one model can do both things or not, and what some of the weird things are. So although we're showing a lot of different examples of word creation processes, the overall goal here is just to get experience problem solving and figuring out how to analyze things. Because even though we have different word formation processes, the way that we model these is I wouldn't say identical, but it's similar. So if we can use a problem solving strategy for one process, we can use it for other processes as well. So we'll talk about concatenative morphology, which is if you have two morphemes X and Y, it's about putting them together back to back, or maybe inside, like affixation. So you can draw these nice little tree structures for complex words with concatenative morphology. Compounding we'll talk about in a couple weeks. And then we talk about non-concatenative morphology. So this is like taking a word ring and changing it to rang or rung. So something inside is changing, or maybe it's a word category that's changing. Like you take the word bottle, which is a noun, and then you make the word to bottle, which is a verb. And that to is just like silent. So it's just the word has changed category. And we'll talk about two different models for this. So the morpheme-based model for concatenative morphology, and the word-based model for non-concatenative morphology and concatenative morphology. So affixation and compounding, we've seen this stuff last week, so I won't talk too much about it. What I will say is that these affixes, like full, for hopeful, careful, regretful, these have selectional restrictions. So if you imagine with full, it's a little picky about what it wants. So it does not want verbs, it does not want adjectives. What it does want are nouns. So we can say that full has a selectional restriction for nouns. But it's not just word category that we can restrict for. It could be other things. It could be like it restricts to certain tenses or certain aspects or noun class. So any sort of inflectional property or semantic property. So when we think about how words are created, we might think in a concatenative sense, like morphemes are combining to create words. And one of the assumptions of concatenative morphology is that it behaves similar to syntax. So in syntax, we have rules like a sentence has a subject and a predicate. So a subject is a DP here, a predicate is a VP, and we can note this hierarchy split with the tree structure. The assumption of the morpheme-based model is that we have word-based rules very similar to the phrase structure rules. So a word has a base and a suffix. So it could have a base interest, and it gets ing to make it an adjective interesting. So if we can model something through syntactic rules, we can model words through word structure rules. Now these trees tell us categories and how they combine, but it doesn't show us the lexical selectional restrictions. So it doesn't show us these selectional restrictions. So for instance, it doesn't tell us what this ing wants. It doesn't tell us what an ER wants. It doesn't tell us what an S wants. So we can introduce things called lexical entries that show us this. And then we can use those lexical entries for combinations. So if we have a word like attack, we can denote a few things. We have a phonetic component in each entry. It could, or I should say, it could be orthographic component if it's not on sounds. We have some sort of syntactic information here. So this is our syntax. in the case of attack, this is a verb, so we write V. And then we have semantic information below. So this is the meaning. So each of our lexical entries contains three things: phonetic information, syntactic information, and semantic information. Now our morphemes can be described this way too. So this is the morpheme or, like in the word actor. So it's pronounced This notation right here says that you have a verb here, and then /or is added afterwards. So the little dash is where the morpheme is. And then the bottom one gives us a meaning. So this is agentive. This is actually derivational. I know I said that capital letters means inflection, but that's not always the case. When you have a derivational affix that's standard across all languages in terms of its meaning, or does something to argument structure, which we'll talk about later, it'll use capital letters too. So this just means one who does, and then whatever the verb is. So an actor is one who does acting. An eater is one who does eating. So we have information about our morphemes here, and we use this information to tell us what things can combine in our trees. So this would tell us that if we have a verb and we have or, we can join them together to make a noun. So with this, we can make tree structures. And with tree structures, we can look at internal word structure, and we can look at hierarchies. So we can get different meanings. This gives us ambiguity. So if we have the words unlockable, there's two different ways that we can do this. We can do, first of all, it's lockable. So this can be locked. So can be locked. And then we can make it unlockable. So now this is can't be locked. So you're adding the not prefix to a word that means can be locked. But in the second case, where un attaches to lock first and able is after, so this is just the verb unlock. So this is to reverse locking. And when we say unlockable, this just means that it can be unlocked. So the meanings are different. One is something cannot be locked. It's unlockable. And the other one says it's unlockable. It can be unlocked. It has the potential to be unlocked. And sort of a side thing here is that this un in each example is a different prefix. So what this un is doing, un1, we'll call this un1, is it's taking an adjective and it's keeping it as an adjective. And this just means not. There's a second un on the right for unlock that has a verb and keeps it as a verb, and this has a reversative meaning. So I just wanted to show in these that we have two different uns here. So even though it's the word unlockable, it's not just the structure that's changing, it's also the morphemes un that are changing there. Okay, so here's a practice exercise to fill in word categories at each node, and then also to write the lexical entries. So remember, a lexical entry has the phonetic form, it has the syntactic restrictions or categories, and then it has the meaning at the bottom. So I'm not going to do the meaning part. Well, I guess for the sake of the first exercise I will. So try this yourself. Use the models here as guidelines for how to make models for each of the morphemes in the other one. So looking at that, let's just put in categories first. So depart is a verb, department is a noun, departmental is an adjective, departmentalize is a verb, and redepartmentalize is also a verb. So I didn't put in the words for affixes there, but if I'm being full, all of these should just say affix. But if it's unlabeled, that'll just be assumed. Okay, so really depart should split into two other morphemes, D and part. So this would be a verb to part, and then we'd have the affix here, D. But we can just treat depart as one thing for this. So for depart, we have part as the phonetic transcription. We have the verb as its category, and then the meaning is just depart. So we'll just use the word in quotation marks to give the meaning. We could come up with some paraphrase for it, but that's fine. So if we take a look at meant, so this is a suffix, meant. It attaches to verbs, so it appears on the right side of verbs. And what is its meaning? Well, sometimes the meaning is hard, like government, department. What is meant? So if we can't figure out the meaning, we can always just write down what it does. So this takes a verb and changes it to its noun form. Okay, we can do ol, departmental, so we have the ol morpheme, something like that. It attaches to the right side of nouns. And what does departmental mean? Like the ol in departmental. This might be difficult to give a meaning, so we can say it takes nouns and turns them into adjectives. So the other ones, I'm not going to draw the matrix for them. So eyes attaches to the right of adjectives. It takes an adjective, converts it to a verb. And then re sounds like re. It attaches to the left side of verbs, so we put the dash to the left of the verb. And this is just like an iterative meaning. It does something once and it does it again. So iterative, or just one more time. So we could just say V to V here as well. Okay, so that's English affixation. And with the morpheme-based model, that was nice. So we created lexical entries, and then we then we had a tree structure represent how they were put together. So base modification does something different. We're not adding something. Instead, we're changing something. So mouse to mice, louse to lice. The plural form is changing the internal vowel. In Dutch, it's the same. So mand to mand, gas to gas. So this is man to men and goose to geese. Then Albanian does something similar with the final sound. The final sound changes. So how do we do this in our morpheme-based model with tree structures? Well, if we have like mouse and we add a plural to it, normally what happens in a tree structure is you get affixation. You get mouse is. But here we have mice. And this isn't really great because tree structures are about hierarchy. It's about constituency. So we don't really have any plural constituency at the end. What people have suggested is saying, okay, here's mouse. Here's this unpronounced plural. We get mice at the end, and it does something. So, and something's happening that changes the internal sound. But this is not good. So we need another way to do this. And that is with the word-based model. And what the word-based model does not do is tell us how things are put together. It doesn't even tell us what things are morphemes or not. That's not important in the word-based model. What's important are just patterns, word form patterns. So here's the past tense: love, rub, loved, rubbed. So we have new lexical entries. It's a new type of lexical entry. We have the pronunciation with the category in the first line, and we have the meaning on the bottom. So here's love, and here, well, let's just call this minus past, and let's call these ones plus past. So when we take a look at these, we're looking for similarities. So for example, let me get rid of these circles and actually just do some underlining here. If we take love and loved, the similar bit is love. If we take rub and rubbed, the similar bit is rub. Now, if we take a look at both of these patterns, we notice the same thing. In each of the past tense forms, there's this extra sound. So what we can do is we can create a general word schema. And we can say, okay, if we have something of the form X, so X is whatever. And we have a plural form with whatever that thing is. So X is the same, but we add D to it. Then we get a past form. But this isn't actually telling us that we're adding anything. What this is just telling us, this model, is that there is a set of word forms that looks like X, it's whatever. And there's a set of word forms that look like X with D after it. And the difference between those forms is one is present tense, one is past tense. So what this says on the right side, if we have something X that's a verb, we can make the past tense of X by putting a D at the end. I should rephrase that because that's not exactly what it says. What it says is there are word forms that look like X, and there are word forms that look like X with a D at the end. One is the singular, one is the past, and they can go back and forth. Now, this doesn't account for every single case in English, but it's a good general word form that tells us how singular forms relate to plural forms. So these are how word forms relate to each other, how they vary and covary. So here's the German example. Now, if we take a look, Mond and Mand, Gas and Gas, the M in each of these and the ND in each of these is the same. It's the vowel that's changing. And it's the same with Goose and Geese, Gas and Gas. So the first letter, G, the last letter S, in both of these are the same, but it's the vowel that's changing. Now, what's important in this example is that the M and the ND, the G and the S, it doesn't matter what they are. But there's something on the left and something on the right of this vowel. And that same stuff on the left and right, X and Y, stay the same, but the vowel changes. And it's the exact same pattern with the other word forms here. There's something to the left and right of the vowel, and it is the vowel that is changing. So we can use variables here and say, if we have a word form of the form XAY, where X and Y are whatever, and it's a noun, there's going to be another word form, XAY, that's also a noun. The top one is singular, the bottom one is plural. So it's not really telling us anything about the process. It's just saying there's two word forms. There's a singular form and a plural form. If you have a singular form of XAY, where X and Y are whatever, we can change it into a form XAY, where X and Y are the same thing, but it's plural. Or we could go back and forth. Okay, so this sort of idea of finding commonalities and using these dummy variables is a consistent pattern in modeling. So try this with interact and interaction. So create word schema that accounts for both. And if we take a look here, what's changing? Interact, construct. Interaction, construction. So what's changing is this T is changing to shin, to shin. So this means we have something of the form X, and then we have T at the end. So XT is becoming X shin, or vice versa. So if we have a lexical entry, we might have X with a T. This is a verb to interact. This just has some meaning X. And we can contrast this with X with shun. Now it's changing to a noun, so we subscript this with a noun. And this is just interact, interaction. It's like the event of whatever the verb form was. So the key thing that we've seen in changes in this morphological correspondence is t to sh, and also the category change v to n. Now this might overgeneralize. For example, if we have the word eat, well, this is eat. We don't have a word like eat shen. So it's not covering every case, but it's doing a good job for most of our verbs, if they have this form. So we might have some issues there. Another issue we have is that based on this word model, it looks like T is a morpheme. The T. It's not saying it's a morpheme, but it looks like one because the X is the same in both cases, but then the T is changing to shun. But if you think about the word interact, that T is part of the root act in that case. So the T should not be its own morpheme here. So if we use, say, letters, interact versus interact shun, we might get a better account of where our morpheme boundaries actually are, because then we just have this ION difference. So this would be like X and X shun are back and forth, where X is the verb form, shun is the noun form, but letters aren't words, so maybe that's not the best way to do it. It does account for the morpheme boundaries more nicely. However, we don't work with spelling, we work with sounds. So then we looked at another case of potential affixation. So in French, we have masculine and feminine verb forms. Sorry, these are adjective forms. So a logical way of doing this is saying we have a masculine form X, and to make the feminine form, what we do is we add D to the end. That could be one way of taking a look at how to make these adjectives. Another way of doing it is to say, actually, we have a fem form X that ends with a D, and in the masculine form, we just remove the D. So we have two ways of analyzing this data set, and based on what we've seen before, with the fact that concatenative patterns are more common than non-concatenative patterns in languages, this would be our best guess about how this works. Masculine, add D to make feminine. But if we take a look at some more words, we see that this is not actually the case. With happy, Z is there. With white, blanche, sh is there. Log is there. There's a G at the end. So it's not as simple as just adding D. There's two ways of doing this now. If we go from masculine to feminine, we're taking some form X, and then we're adding some consonant. And this consonant differs. So we might have to figure out a scenario that tells us which consonant it is. There's not a nice way to do this. That's the spoiler for that. But going from feminine to masculine, what if we say, okay, we have a form X and there's some consonant at the end. Who cares what it is? But to make the masculine form, let's just take that consonant off. So let's say we have this word. We start in the feminine form. To make the masculine form, we just remove the last sound. So we take the G and we just get rid of it. So that's the best way to analyze this. We're removing a sound. So this is what's called subtraction. And to do this, we're going to model it in our word-based model. So let's create some lexical entries for masculine adjectives. So this is going to be of the form X. This is masculine, and it's an adjective. So we'll just say whatever the meaning here is of X is, and what is the corresponding form in the feminine? Well, it's X with some consonant. This is now a feminine adjective, and this has the same meaning as X, but it's feminine. So we can use variables like C and V to represent some consonant or some vowel, and we can index them too. So if we have two consonants like C1 and C2, we can manipulate them by indexing them. So what you'll notice with this morphological correspondence is that it doesn't actually tell us what the process is. It doesn't tell us if we're doing affixation or subtraction. All it's telling us is that there are word forms, masculine adjectives that look like X, and there are feminine word forms that look the same, but there's some consonant at the end. So this is how we can model them, and then we can use our words to supplement and say this is a case of subtraction. But from the model itself, it's not completely obvious that this is subtraction. Okay, with backformation, this is kind of like subtraction, but with backformation, these affixes like and shun and iv, the things being removed, look like regular morphemes, look like regular affixes. So babysitter existed as a word, and we derived the word babysit from it because we thought this in babysitter was the morpheme that turns verbs into nouns. So we just reversed the process. Donation, same thing. Donation was around first. We thought that this, so donation. So I'm just doing IPA for the last sounds. What's interesting about this, so donation was around, and we converted it into donate. So we also used the phonological process of changing shun to t to create the word donate. So we really did think that this was a morpheme when we did backformation. So actually the model for this is pretty similar to subtraction. So with babysitter to babysit, well, we have some form X, there's at the end, this is a noun, and it's going to correspond with the form X, which is a verb, where you don't have that And again, you can't really tell if this is affixation or not, because this goes both ways, but we can use our writing to supplement it and explain what the process is. So babysit this is, I guess it's just Xer, so one who X's, and this is just X, whatever the meaning is. So if it's babysitter, it's one who babysits, and babysit just means to babysit. Sometimes we don't have the full paradigm. So like if you take a word attraction, yeah, we could create the word attract from that. But a word like illusion, we haven't yet created a word elude. We might one day, or aggression might make the form of the word agret, I don't know. But that could happen at some point. We have word formation processes that happen to do with suprasegmental changes. So things like stress or tone. So in 2-syllable words in English, there's noun forms and verb forms for some of them. So you can think of it as like 2 syllables. There's re and cord. So record, where the stress is on the first syllable, is a noun. Record, where stress is on the second syllable, is a verb. And we just put this little bar before the syllable that we want to stress. So up here, this is primary stress on the first syllable, and up here, if we have 2 syllables, this is primary stress on the second. So looking at a word like import or import, stress on the first one is the noun form. Import, stress on the second syllable, is the verb form. So we can see there's a similarity between these two. First stress is noun, second stress is verb. So we can use syllables as a variable. So if you have 2 syllables and stress is on the first one here, this is the noun form. If we have 2 syllables and stress is on the second one, we have the verb form. And these correspond with each other. So this is whatever the meaning of X is, and this would be 2X. Like to do something, like to record. Maybe that's not the best way to put the meaning, but it's close enough for this example. So that's a generalized word schema. So again, this doesn't tell us where we start or what we're actually doing. This just says if you have 2 forms where one is stress on the first syllable and one is stress on the second syllable, this second one is the verb form, this first one is the noun form. So we have a bunch of different variables now that we can use and we can model anything with. So this was the final practice exercise we did this week, modeling conjunctive and optative verbs in Connery. So conjunctive forms just mean like to do something and something else. So the conjunctive form of go is like I will go and do something else. The optative form is like to hope or to definitely do. So the optative form of to go is like I am to go somewhere later. Okay, then we have tones too. So if we have something that goes up on a vowel, it's a high tone. If it goes down on a vowel, it's a falling tone. So when we take a look at these, pause it and try it yourself, we see similarities in all of these forms. So les is the same, tus is the same, keraz is the same. And what's changing is the final vowel. So the tone on the final vowel. Now in this case, it's just A, it's all the same vowel, but maybe we have different vowels. So for the conjunctive form, let's just use our data set here. We have X, and then we have some vowel E with falling tone, and this is the conjunctive verb form. And then we have another one where we have whatever the X form is, but now we have high tone on it, and this is now the optative verb form. So we can say they correspond with each other here. Now, maybe it's more general. Maybe there's something like mizo with falling tone and mizo with high tone. So mizo or mizo. In which case, we might want to be more general and say there's any vowels. So it could be the fact that you have XV falling corresponding with XV high. And this would be the general form where we have these different vowels. So that's everything we did this week. I know these are definitely way faster than lectures, but I hope you were able to pause them, try them yourself, and get comfortable with the problem-solving process. So even though these are all different ways that languages create words, and these are all different processes in creating words, the way that we approach modeling them is very similar. And we saw some stuff that was just done with sounds, some stuff that was done with syllables, some stuff that was general to like any consonant or any vowel. So if you have any questions about the stuff, please email me. If this format is too fast or it's not working, let me know and I can make adjustments. So please give feedback on how fast this is and how the pacing is. So that way I can refine these each week into something that better suits the online learning style without me doing a substantial extra amount of work.